And welcome again to our new show on the Pigskin Preview. We are on with the Knucklehead podcast. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is myself, Coach Shane McGowan, on with Mr. Baltimore Blaine, Mr. Mark Hirsch, and again, our great guy, Mr. Chris Rose. We are going to be breaking down everything tonight that's been going on throughout the weeks with the free trades and teams picking and grabbing people like no tomorrow. Right now, though, I think we're going to start with our quarterbacks. We're going to break it off to see exactly a few guys that have been now put on their teams and a little bit more stability there. So we're going to start with a little bit of quarterback talks and probably controversies naturally. And I think the first one we're going to go out there to, and I'm going to get this going here, is let's just start. We'll start with the lonely Arizona Cardinals. I'm going to start with the smallest and work our way up to the biggest. I'm going to start with the Cardinals right now. The biggest thing I think is what they signed with Mr. Sam Bradford. Again, a 1-year deal. Nothing big, nothing long term, just a 1-year deal over there in Arizona. They needed somebody. They didn't have any quarterbacks at all on the rosters. This is something that needed to get done. This is who they felt is their best, I guess, most reliable, I guess you could say, at this particular time for this team. It's going to be interesting, no question about it. Again, though, Arizona's in a bit of a fickle situation themselves when it comes to offensive and defensive. Who they've got out there, who are they going to have backing up Bradford? Are they going to be looking to make some moves to get somebody in the picks in the draft? I don't know just yet, but that is who our first quarterback is. Again, it was a move they needed to do. And I'm going to let these other fellas take over and talk a little bit about what they think about how Arizona is going to do with Mr. Sam Bradford at the helms. And I'll start over there with Mr. Baltimore Blaine.
Yo, yo, what's up?
How are
I
you,
uh
sir?
I am fine, sir. You sound lively.
Lots of energy tonight.
All right. Question about Bradford. Sam Bradford is has he been guaranteed the starting position?
Well, from what I understand, he was signed for the 1 year. And at this particular time, yes, he is the guy. The problem that I'm going to say this, though, is that he wasn't really medically cleared during Minnesota after his knees and his legs and stuff. So I don't know exactly what Arizona is going to do over there, but apparently he's there for the year, and they're the ones that want him. So
The reason I asked that is because I find it very interesting that Sam Bradford signs a 1-year contract, but Mike Glennon gets a 2-year contract. And I'm
well, and
wondering if there's going to be some competition.
well, I would hope that they would put in some friendly competition out there and put the best guy out. But I guess
Yeah.
they're either using Bradford as insurance just to make sure because he's been in the league how long and has been part of again when he was playing for the Vikings, he did a great job. Until he did go down. There's no question about it. So I
Yeah.
think they're relying on his leadership skills in that.
And there's also the draft. So I wouldn't, I would expect that Cardinals will take a quarterback in the draft.
I was
I,
actually just about to say the same thing, Blaine. So that was gonna be that was that was the response I was gonna put in there. So go ahead, guys.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
that's going to be a very interesting dynamic there in training camp for and for this season with the rebuilding Cardinals. Mister Hirsch.
Thank you, Baltimore Blaine. It's good to be back. I know we haven't been on the air for a while. I'm happy to be here. Sam Bradford. I uh, I think a 1-year contract is generous. With the way his legs were when he was in Minnesota, I don't even think he can make it for a year. And that's no, talking down to his skills or anything, but it's about the physicality. And if they put him out there week after week, I don't think he's going to make it. So, and then when you think about Glennon and what he has brought to the teams he's been with, I it doesn't look good for the Cardinals unless they come up with a superstar in the draft that they can integrate into the team rather quickly. I My first thought when I was hearing about the Bradford signing is, well, he had to go somewhere, but not much help there. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I know it's funny. That seems like for some reason, like maybe 2 or 3 times a month, the show always has to touch on Bradford and Case Keenum and things. But that's really what's going on right now, and it's disappointing because Bradford. We always talk about how he had the highest percentage of completions in history the year before when he got to the team. Like right at the beginning, he was set up ready to go. He threw for 80%. I don't know if you guys remember. Everyone remembers that Bears debacle when he tried to come back with those bad knees, but people forget that first game he played. That was probably one of the best performances by any quarterback in the entire league. I mean, he threw for like 82, 83%, 3 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, he just went crazy. So it's sad, and I totally understand the 1 year. And we'll get into some of the other teams that we want to talk about. Are they rebuilding or are they doing something different? In my mind, if you have a franchise quarterback, you're never truly rebuilding unless he's a rookie or like an Andrew Luck. Like if you have that piece set, it's just so important, so important. But what the other thing that they do have is they have David Johnson, and if he can come back the way he was before, in my mind, that's the best offensive player, or top three to step foot on the field. So he can do a lot when you can hand the ball off 25 times and throw it 10 times to, one of the best athletes in the league. So it's been so long since we got to talk to you guys, and we brought up about, where we thought some of these players were going. And so, it actually looks like they did go, and it's all set up now. And we have an idea of what those teams are going to look like. So, let's talk about this. How about who got the better end of the deal? Washington, Minnesota, or Denver? Who got the best gig, and who's gonna blow up and actually make something this year? From who's gonna take a step up? I should say that'd be the better way to put it. Who's gonna take a step up because of the quarterback contract that they just signed of those three teams? Shane?
Well, yeah, like you said, between Washington, who took in Mr. Alex Smith from Kansas City, to let go of Kirk Cousins. But the difference is that Alex Smith and Kirk Cousins, I'm still trying to figure out why they wouldn't sign him to a long-term, Mr. Cousins, and yet you signed Alex Smith to a long-term, but yet you still don't have an offense in Washington. So does it really matter who's throwing that ball right now? And that's the biggest thing that's going to happen. What the heck is Washington going to do if they don't have an O-line to protect that quarterback, if they don't have some deep threat inside and a good, solid tight end to catch the ball for you as well? So really, the difference between Alex Smith and Kirk Cousins to me is really just a swap deal. I just don't see Washington doing much unless they start upping that offense, getting a good O-line in there to protect Smith at this particular time, because that's what they need. Defensively, they weren't too bad. They still need help, but offensively, Washington needs some help there for any quarterback that's going to be in that situation. Mr. Blaine, what do you think about Washington?
I think you kind of, well, to the question of why Alex Smith over Kirk Cousins, I'll go back to what I said on a previous show, is that I think it's about the fact that Kirk Cousins, first of all, why take so long? If you really believe in Kirk Cousins, why is it taking so long to sign him? For some reason, it seems like Washington didn't have, they just didn't see. It's sort of like Case Keenum and the Vikings. You got a piece there, but you go out and you get another piece that's not much difference from the piece that you had. But I think the thing with this, and what I'm reading into it, is that Alex Smith, and I don't know what his contract is. Guys, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be honest about it. Everything's been so crazy, I don't even know where I am now with free agency. So I might be asking questions like where is Adrian Peterson signed somewhere? I don't know. But I think that that the fact is, I believe Alex Cousins, they looked at Alex Cousins as being a cheaper option. Now with the money that they saved, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows the details of his contract extension.
Yeah,
With the money that they
but
save, they can build an offense around him.
see, but that's the thing, Blaine. They signed Alex Smith to the contract that Cousins wanted, but they weren't willing to pay, so they franchised him. So he's making a huge amount of money. He's making the money that Cousins asked for.
Ah,
So basically,
so they
Washington
don't.
said we've been holding out with this franchise tag to land Alex Smith.
So they don't like him.
Apparently not. Apparently not.
What about
and
you,
I'm
Mr.
gonna
Hurst?
and I'm no, and I'm going to say that. I'm going to say that is I got a feeling that throughout the seasons they didn't have enough faith and trust in Kirk Cousins to get the job and to get them going further and further into a playoff pitcher. And I guess they feel that Alex Smith is that guy that can do it.
But the problem with this, and I'll pass this to Mr. Hurst. The problem with that is they hired one of the best, general managers in the league, and he was dying to sign Cousins. And part of that rift is when they basically put a muzzle on him, and then the owner and the president decided not to and went their own way, and he quit, and now you have what you have. So, sorry, Mr. Hirsch, go ahead. What do you? Because I know you have a strong feeling about Mr. Smith and how bad the Redskins management is.
Well, first of all, I think that whole thing was definitely about the money. They may have given Alex Smith a little bit more or the same as what Kirk Cousins wanted before the start of last season. But by the time this season rolled around, they were going to have to pay a lot more to get him. And I just don't think they wanted to do it for some reason. And I think Kirk Cousins is an unproven quantity. They never gave him in Washington the supporting cast that he needed that we could see what he could do. Sure, he had good stats. He threw a lot of short and medium passes on the margins and amped up his stats. But the question is, what is he going to do when he's on a team that is trying to win, and whether he's going to be able to be the driving force on that. I'm with Blaine. I don't know what's going on. It's chaos. I hear so many things, it's hard to even remember them all. Did the Vikings sign Diggs again, or is he still out there? I mean, Cousins is going to need, some help if he's going to move the Vikings forward. I think definitely I will be surprised if he is able to do what Case Keenum did. And so I think I think that the Vikings have made a mistake here, and I may be proven wrong, but I think it's going to be a tough nut to crack for Kirk Cousins to do what Case Keenum did. Blake,
And I'm looking at the fact that Kirk Cousins got a 3-year guaranteed, all fully guaranteed contract, whereas Alex Smith had a 4-year, and I don't know the details of his contract. So as far as the salary cap is concerned, it might be a lot friendlier contract for Alex Smith in Washington as opposed to Kirk Cousins in Washington.
And that's something that there are some people in the league that are praising Kirk Cousins for standing up, not taking that deal. Because a franchise tag is a risky thing because an injury and you're done, right? Especially when you're at the top of the game and you're one of the most wanted quantities. The quantity being like, that franchise quarterback. You're one of those wanted, unique things that are hard to find in any sport. And he stood by his guns. He got crazy paid, did okay, and then he got a fully guaranteed contract from Minnesota. And that's how Minnesota beat out the Jets, who were willing to pay more. That and, like we've talked about before, Minnesota's winning. So I want to go over real quick what Minnesota's doing so far. So they did lose a couple of pieces, but you brought up those receivers. And one of the moves that's going to go down as genius in when we look back on this era of the Vikings is, first of all, taking a chance on a guy who wasn't even picked up as a as a free agent after the draft. He actually had to go to one of those tryout camps to get onto the Vikings. And at the end of his couple of years on a futures contract, they decided to extend him. And then he blew up the league last year. And I'm talking about Adam Thielen. I mean, it's one of those feel good stories, but they got Thielen for a lot. It's one of those things like you hit and you sign that contract the year before he goes ham. And he went crazy last year, and they got him for an unbelievably cheap price. They have Diggs this year, but definitely they're going to pay for him next year. They have some, they nailed it with that running back that got hurt, Cook. I mean, they got a lot going, and now they just picked up from the Seahawks, who we're going to get to later on in the show, but I do not understand what they're doing. They had to give up a second-round pick and a ton of money to get Sheldon Richardson last year, with the idea is after he played the last year of his contract, they're going to bring him back, and the Vikings just snatched him. And so now you have that defensive line with those linebackers and safeties, and now you add Sheldon Richardson. I mean, that team is looking nasty. And I don't think – so it's going to be interesting to see, because I think in Washington – Kirk Cousins had to throw, and that's why you have that. We've told the story a lot about how he pads his stats and how he throws those little out routes, and really just wanted to do what he wanted to do. In this case, he doesn't have to, and I don't think that that coach will put up with it either. I think you have a much stronger coach in Zim than you do in Gruden 2.0. So I'm actually kind of optimistic about that. So just before we move on from the quarterbacks. Because there's so much going on, two things I want to touch on, and you guys can choose what you want to do.
I think.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Chris. I think Mr. Hirsch wanted to chime in.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that there. Go ahead, Mr. Hirsch. My fault.
Well, and there's a lot more to talk about with the quarterbacks. I mean, but what I was going to make a comment in response to your talk about the Minnesota's awesome defense. They say that defenses win championships, but that's only if they have an offense that can put some points on the board. And that's why I was wondering about Stephon Diggs and some of the other things. Is Cook going to come back strong? I think there are some questions there. I agree that the Vikings are looking really strong, but I think there are some questions there. And as I hope if we go off the quarterback subject now that we're going to go back to some of the other things that are happening, like Teddy Bridgewater to the Jets, Case Keenum over to Denver, Minnesota picking up Simeon. I mean, there's a lot of other pieces to the quarterback chaos this week, as well as what we've talked about. And then, does anybody know if Drew Brees ever signed a contract with the Saints?
Yeah.
Okay,
he's
good.
back. He's back.
So how about I missed that.
So instead of because I think we're killing a lot of time on these quarterbacks. So how about this? Why don't you pick one of those subjects, Mr. Hirsch, either the Jets with the two quarterbacks or Denver, and then I'll give a different question to the other two gentlemen, so we can, because I want to touch on the quarterbacks for the people, especially since we missed 2 weeks. But I think you're right. If we just sit here and talk about quarterbacks, that'll pretty much be the entire show.
Well, I want to talk about Case Keenum going to the Broncos. Okay. And I want to remind everybody that I've been saying on the Pigskin Preview for a couple of our last shows that I thought that was going to be a good home for him. I thought that it might be a place where he could get into the playoffs and possibly make a run again because of their strong defense. And the fact that the big piece to the Broncos puzzle that was missing was definitely at the quarterback position. We saw that last year. So I thought that was a good move for Case Keenum. I think it's a good move for the Broncos. And I think he's much better off there than with the Jets or with anyone else. I think it's going to suit him fine.
Why don't we go Coach Shane and then Blaine on the Jets. Please and thanks.
Okay, well, you know what? First, I'm going to agree with Mr. Hirsch. I think that's a great move for Denver to get Case Keenum. Because you're absolutely correct there. That was just a gong show of mixing your quarterbacks almost every week, and there was no consistency at all, even though they did try a few times with some of the guys, but then bang, they get injured. then you're relying on that defense to try to keep you in the games. And that was a tough season for that defense of Denver to do it. So you're right. This is going to be a big momentum changer. They still need some pieces out there to get that offensive going. But you're right. It's going to be a better season, I think, all around for Denver. No question about that. Now, if we're going to jump over to the East Coast and get to the New York Jets, that's going to be an interesting one. They signed Teddy to a 1-year contract as well. Again, all these 1-year contracts. And they're gonna say, okay, you're gonna compete against good old Josh there, and say, hey, let's see the best guy go out and do what they can do. I think if Teddy Bridgewater is mobile enough, I think if he can grasp everything the way he did before he got injured in Minnesota, he's going to make some things happen if he can get himself into that right mindset, right groove, and understand exactly the pace of the game again, the speed, everything like that. It takes a while because he's been off for so long. And when he did get back into Minnesota, it was just for a couple of series. We all know that. So he's really going to buckle down. But I do think he's got that spark in him. He's young enough to get himself going. So I do think he's going to definitely get himself out there and doing a lot more freestyling with his mobility to run. And I think that's what's going to keep the Jets a little bit more of a team to kind of watch if they can help him with some O-line as well as another good deep threat at the receiver position. What do you think about that, Mr. Blaine?
I think you're right. I think the Jets with Teddy Bridgewater going to the Jets, as long as that O-line can protect him and and he's not worried about his knees, then I think he'll have a resurgence in New York. New York now, I mean, the Jets they weren't that far off last year. They surprised a lot of people. I didn't see it coming. I thought they were rebuilding, and they actually were very competitive in most of their games. As far as the competition there, I would, is there a competition there? Teddy Bridgewater, is he guaranteed to be the starter, or is Josh McCown going to be the starter? Again,
well, that like you just said, is they're going to bring both these guys in and say, okay, let's get out there and let's get some competitiveness. And I think they're trying to do that just to get a spark in that offense.
Yeah. Yeah. What about you, Chris?
No, I want to talk about just what a badass Josh McCown is. That guy just hangs around, and when he gets his shot, he nails it. And last year, people were betting on if the Jets would win one game. And I remember in the fantasy world, I said, I'm going to play 2 lineups with Josh McCown in it. Like, you're crazy. And he threw over 300 yards like 8, 9, 10 times with nobody to throw to. And now they got, who do they got? They got McKinnon. They have, the Jets are actually kind of loading up a bit. And it seems to me to be a little bit of a, they got Crowell from the Browns, who's only 25 years old, which I didn't know, who was absolutely misused by that. I don't know. I think we're still G-rated or PG-rated. So that beep of a team. I don't understand what they're doing with Crowell, but he's had the highest average yards per carry of any running back over the last couple of years, but he only gets 10 carries a game. That makes zero sense to anyone, with the brain. So I think they're really starting to put a couple of things together. And what was the other thing? They're picking up some people. They got cap room. They have a ton of cap room. And I always thought that I was a little bit confused by the Bridgewater signing. They got him for cheap enough, and they have enough cap where you could cut him in training camp, with the thought being, let's see who falls to us in the draft, and then let it be a 3-way competition or kind of a 2-way competition with Bridgewater and the other person, because I think McCown is the best backup in the league, meaning that it's hard for him to stay healthy in games, and at the same time, he's been around for 18 years. So I think that's really interesting to see. Now, something that I'm not excited to see but someone on this call is going to be excited to see. So I'm going to change the order up just a little bit. We're going to go to Mr. Hirsch after me. The Packers got rid of Jordy, which I understood because he was being paid for the Jordy of 2 or 3 years ago, not the Jordy recently. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But, well, and once again, we're going to get to the Seahawks in a second, but people act like, that team was bad, but you also had the quarterback who threw more touchdown passes than anyone in the league. And you had Pro Bowl tight end that had more touchdowns in the red zone and period. And now he's going to Aaron Rodgers. And if you can somehow scheme him going out solo, one-on-one with somebody way out on the left side and Aaron throwing to him, I'm not really sure how anyone's going to stop that. So, there's a couple other moves that, the Packers have made that are more in the, the middle range. But what do you think about how your Packers are doing so far, Mr. Hirsch?
Well, it's a big change for the Packers that have traditionally stayed out of the first week of free agency and relied on building the team up through the draft. That was the way Ted Thompson did it, and many of the fans didn't like it, constantly screaming for the management to make some moves in free agency, and now they're making a few. They bring in Jimmy Graham. I think he's a great fit for Aaron Rodgers. You're right. The reason they had to let go of Jordy was because they didn't have much room under the cap. And they did try to renegotiate with Jordy Nelson, but he didn't take the deal. And so they had to let him go. So it's partly on him. And it's true that ever since he came back after that season-long ACL injury, he's been a couple of steps slower. And he hasn't quite been the Jordy Nelson that he was before. So now he's at the Raiders and Jimmy Graham is at the Packers. The Packers also picked up Muhammad Wilkerson from the Jets, who was he's paid a huge contract by the Jets. I think that he was getting he had signed an $86 million extension with them just 2 years ago. And so there we go. Shoring up the defensive line. It was a little shaky since they lost Julius Peppers back to North Carolina, and Julius Peppers was a real stud when he was on the Packers. He did a lot for them, and he was gone, and things were different last year. So now they've got Muhammad Wilkerson, and he might do some good things for them. They signed Randall Cobb. And they've got Devontae Adams under contract, so they're still missing a piece in their passing attack. They have last year's rookie Geronimo Allison, who actually made some phenomenal catches late in the season, grabbing a ball just before it hit the ground and keeping his feet in bounds when he had to reach over the line to catch the ball. Yeah, he showed some good stuff, but he's a young rookie. He's there, but I think that the piece that the Packers are missing on offense would be another deep threat wide receiver. And on defense, they've got to look at getting some cornerbacks. And they also lost Morgan Burnett, who was one of their safeties, who was a important part of the team. So it's a mixed bag with the Packers.
So real quick, I know I gotta pass it around, but I think that the one thing the Packers have always missed and never had, and I'll give you a quick opportunity if you want to come back to this. If not, we'll go around the circle. But is you guys have never had a tight end, and we kind of thought that was what Bennett was going to be last year. And we'll get into later on when it's not so much news. How the doctors on the Green Bay staff lost that deal with how they kind of I don't know what it is. We'll talk about that later, but a Hall of Fame tight end in the red zone that you can throw it up with 3 people around him and he can just jump up with one hand and take it away. I would say that's what they've been missing, and that's why I'm really scared if they both stay healthy.
Well, what can I say? I'm very happy about this. I think it was a great move for them, and I don't discount Jimmy Graham at all. I think he's still got a lot of play left in him. Blaine?
Chris, you jumped on my on one of my topics here, or one of my that Jimmy Graham signing is I really like that. I really like that for the Packers. And yeah, that's going to go tremendously for Aaron Rodgers. And speaking of Aaron Rodgers, Mark Hirsch, how do you feel about that acquiring Deshaun Kaiser in a trade for a fourth and fifth round pick in this draft? Seeing that Aaron Rodgers is not it isn't guaranteed that what we're going to see at the beginning of the season with him. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think that's the issue. I've got my fingers crossed, and when Aaron Rodgers stepped into one game when it looked like the season might be on the line, he didn't have the arm strength that he had before he had the 13 screws in his collarbone. And what I've been praying is that he's been taking it easy and working his arm out and getting back into shape through the offseason. He's going to come back the way that he was. So the question is, after they got rid of Hundley, which I think was a good move also, because he wasn't showing anything, who's going to be a backup just in case? And I think that's the answer. I think they've got a good backup there. And traditionally, the Packers have had good backup quarterbacks that have been with them for a long period of time, kind of as an understudy to the number one guy. And I think it's a good fit.
Well, I don't know about Deshaun Kaiser though, and I think that my initial reaction is they overpaid for him. I mean, I watching him in Cleveland, and the guy's a turnover machine, man. And maybe he'll get in that system. He'll get into that system and develop a little bit more, and and get his feet under him and become the quarterback that the Browns thought that he was going to be. But he was awful last year.
Well, look at who he was playing with. I mean, I guess time will tell, but he's got to be better than Brett Hundley. What can I say? Shane, you got anything to say about the Packers before we pass it over to Chris, who's dying to talk about the Seahawks?
I'm actually not. I'm not dying to talk about it.
All right. I'm going to just make mine real short and sweet here is on the Packers. Is the biggest thing I'm going to say is, you know what? First and foremost is how is that O-line going to be protecting Rodgers this year? Because like we all understand and know, in this league, you got to have an O-line that's going to last you for these next 16, 18 weeks. And I don't know if they've actually got the guys on that weak side that are going to be able to do the job. That's one thing. That's my biggest question when it comes to the Packers offense and the offensive line. I think getting Graham and everybody else, they've got the talent. There's no question about that. But do they have the O-line to stay upright and to keep him upright? And for getting Kaiser like that, I'm going to say the same thing. Like I say this all the time. The coaches are the ones that are going to make a lot of these players great. Did he get the right coaching at Cleveland for him to be productive? And we're going to know that as he goes into Green Bay and he gets his opportunities at certain times or whatever it is. If he's got the right coaching, this young man might actually surprise a lot of people. But again, coaches are what's going to make you in many, many ways. And I think that's a huge thing. So I'm looking at that, and I'm just more, like I said, Mr. Hirsch, I think they did really well with a lot of things. I just don't know if Green Bay's O-line is as good and if they're going to be able to stay a solid part for that team. That's all.
Well, I guess the question on that, Shane, is they were rotating a lot of young guys that were new on the team and didn't have much experience in last year. And is that experience that they got there, plus the work that they're doing in the off season and in the upcoming training camps, going to move them to a higher level? And I guess we'll find out. And another question is, who else will they pick up and what's going to happen in the draft? Chris?
Yeah, I want people to remember something, and for us as well to remember something. If you look back at just even any year, any NFL year, this time of year last year, how we talked about the Rams and how they didn't do anything, and they got some young coach, and thank God they got rid of their coach. But what are they going to do? And all of a sudden they pick up Watkins and all these other people, and they just change and smash. I remember, Seahawk fan when they said they're horrible after, they had what's his name, Mora, for 1 year, and all of a sudden Pete Carroll comes in and changes that whole culture. There's going to be a few teams right now that we can't see, and it's not just the draft. But I like what Mr. Hurst said about, we don't really know, but right now we can't see. And with that said, Seahawk fans, I know I'm supposed to be the homer, but I don't get it at all. I get blowing something up, and especially what we've talked about it many times, and especially Coach Shane being the mental guy. When all that blowing up on the sideline and stuff's going on, when people going crazy on their own time and being aggressive and being themselves, as Pete Carroll put it, for that team, it worked when there was some continuity and they were winning and there was some control. And I think what you saw in the fact that they fired basically the entire coaching staff is that they needed to start over control wise. And I was okay with that. The Sherman deal, people need to understand that he was his own agent. And I think what gets lost in this, and this is the point, I won't go through the whole Seahawk team tonight because we're getting a little shorter on time. But this is something I would like to talk about just a little bit. The Seahawks could have traded Sherman to any team they wanted, including the Browns. And out of respect, they told him, this is where you're messing up as an agent. This is what the problem is. He ruptured his Achilles, which is not an easy thing to come back from. And then 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before free agency came, I've heard multiple reports. Some people call it a foot surgery. Some people call it a bone spur or heel surgery. Some people say that it's his other Achilles, but he had a surgery on his non-ruptured leg for a guy who already was not the fastest corner, but made up for it with just enough speed and intelligence. And then him coming out and going to the Niners and being like, I can't wait to beat the Seahawks twice a year and stuff. I know part of that is what he needs to do to get pumped up and things. But, I just want to make sure as I keep with my homerism that people understand that they didn't trade him and cut him as a favor, not as anything else. He asked for it and they said, if that's what you want, you deserve it. We want to sign you back for less money, but we are going to give you the respect of putting you on the market. And those are the kind of things that you're proud of your team for doing. And then when he turns on you, I don't feel like the people's morons are like burning his jersey and all that stuff. I think that's stupid. Burn jersey. That's not Seahawk fans. That's just the common denominator of dumb people in the world. Period. Same with every other fan base.
It's the alcohol.
But the point is, I want, yeah, well, whatever it is. But I want Baldwin to, but I want him to go to the Hall of Fame. But I want Baldwin to beat him. I want him to get burned. I don't wish anything bad for him as a person, but I definitely want him to get smoked 2 times a year in Seattle. But I actually, unfortunately, don't think that he's really going to be as big of a part of that. And the contract he signed has a huge, huge. And if you can show up, if you can play all 16 games, if you do make those deals. So, you guys can talk about either, the Seahawks or Sherman if you like, but for time-wise, just kind of the idea of playing for winning, playing for money. Like Ndamukong Suh says, I'm going to play for whoever pays me the most. I don't care where I go. Just kind of like what you guys think about that. Because at the end of the day, also, I don't blame Sherman if you're going to get paid, $2 or $3 million less. Like, well, I don't blame a man for taking another job. So, Shane, why don't you? Because you're the mental guy. I mean, what is it that makes someone want to win or take care of business?
Well, you know what? Okay, this is going to be a combination of a little bit of everything when it comes to Mr. Sherman. Is the fact he has pride in himself. He has the confidence in himself, and he still believes that he is the best or one of the best out there and can do a lot. So that's going to carry him forward. And that's why when you say his contract is pretty much incentive based, everything is, picks, playing, everything like that. So his contract is more incentives. That's great in some ways for the team, but for him, that shows. And again, is that his motivation to get out there and show everybody, hey, I am still good and look at what I can do. That's the catch-22 when it comes to a lot of this stuff. Personally, I don't think having Mr. Sherman in the locker room is a great thing if the team is not going in the right direction. I think he can turn that on you in a negative way. I think he can be a leader when he was at times if he can get the guys going. But I do think, though, time has passed him in many ways, and I do think that he is, in some ways, can bring a negative attitude into a locker room. And that's why I said, for San Francisco, who's rebuilding, I honestly believe that it wasn't a good move to pick him up. But I do understand that they wanted some experience back there. I just don't think, though, that they should have went with him. That's my personal opinion. I think San Fran's a team on the rise, and I think they're going to do really well. But I just don't know how much Sherman is going to actually give them, because having 2 Achilles injuries or heel spurs or whatever you want to call it, it still affects your playing ability and affects everything that you're doing out there. So that is my take on what Mr. Sherman and what he is all about. I just don't think that it's a very good move.
Well, I'll tell you, Shane, it's hard to disagree with you because you're so knowledgeable. And I'm not that concerned about Mr. Sherman. What I'm concerned about is what in the world are the Seahawks doing? And the only thing I can figure out is that they've made a conscious decision to rebuild. And I would disagree with Chris Rose, who says that as long as you have your franchise quarterback there, you're not rebuilding. There is no I in the word team, and it takes a team to win. And the way the Seahawks are dealing their guys out of there, they got to be looking at bringing in some new blood or something. A lot of the guys that they let go, they probably are thinking they're aging out, and they're no way going to be as productive as they were in the past. And I think they're looking for fresh blood. So, and as far as Pete Carroll just letting the guys be themselves, when he was stuck with all those guys and he couldn't get them to stop what they were doing, I guess that was a good attitude. But that doesn't mean that he really liked it or thought it was productive or helping the team. So I think they're rebuilding. Chris?
Yeah, all right, that's fair, Mr. Hirsch. I'd say that's a fair statement. The idea was, even when they were being themselves, as long as they were true to the team, it was okay. But it got a little bit out of control. But even if we get rid of that, I mean, he built something unique, and it was time to change. But people are acting like this team, don't forget, like, Sherman got hurt halfway through the season. Cam Chancellor and Averill were hurt at the very beginning of the season. Like, all the guys that they went 9-7 with and missed 3 games because they made a horrible choice on the worst kicker in the world, they'd be a 12-win team. Like, 2 of those 3 games that they lost, he missed 3 kicks, and the other one he missed 2, including a 20-yarder.
I love kickers.
This is not like, but this is not like this team is just like garbage. I mean, the guys who they let go didn't play last year, really, and they went 9-7, lost 3 games without their kicker, and they beat the Super Bowl champions when they had Wentz on the field. So I mean, it's not like these guys are just completely lost. But I guess that's what we're saying. But I do agree with what you're saying, Mr. Hirsch. Maybe my homer side is specific to this team, because I don't think this team is as bad as people think. But at the same time, I would step back what I said just to touch on, if you have a quarterback, you're not rebuilding, as a flat statement. So I do concede that. So why don't we hear from Blaine real quick on that subject, and then we'll get to talking about a team that I don't know how they can screw it up, but they're looking really good.
They will.
Go ahead, Blaine. Why don't you give your
okay, real quick.
And, this will be the end, end of our discussion tonight.
Yeah, real quick, I was just going to say on that subject of rebuilding, and not say we're just going into the second week of the season, folks. I mean, the big splash is all, huh?
Second week of the
Was
off
that?
season.
No, I'm talking about
week of actual off season.
yeah. But I mean, the NFL of the NFL year, it opened up this year. I mean, this past week with the free agency. So teams aren't I'm hearing all over the place. People are panicking because their team hasn't done what they thought that they need to do to get better. And I'm going, we're just into it 1 week. We still have the draft. We still have training camp. We still have we don't know who the undrafted jewels are going to be this year. We got a long way to go before we get to the season. There's still going to be trades. There's still going to be June 1st cuts. So it's like I'm kind of laughing at people who are panicking about their team right now, and I agree that I looks like the Seahawks are rebuilding, but I'm not going to say that they're not going to be competitive because we're just too new into it. And real quick, I want to apologize to Mr. Hirsch. The Deshaun Kaiser thing, I misread the notes. I thought that Green Bay actually lost a fourth and fifth pick, but they actually swapped fourth and fifth picks. So with that, depending on how you feel about Demarius Randall, who was traded for Deshaun Kaiser, maybe I misspoke about him being too expensive or being overpaid, or they paid too much for him, rather. With that kind of transaction, I can see it. Okay, so I'm gonna stop. I'm too long-winded. What did you want to talk about?
Well, it's as far as Demarius Randall, I've been saying it for all year is that the Packers need some decent cornerbacks, and obviously, if I'm saying that, I didn't think Demarius Randall was the man. I think I thought at one point that he could be, but if they get somebody else in that's better, I'm not going to miss him at all.
Okay. So Chris, what did you want to take it to the Browns?
Yeah, let's take it to the Browns. Because I think that Sashi Brown of the Browns got a really raw deal, man. He fell on the sword for a bad coach, and what he built is awesome. Yeah, they didn't do anything last year, but you took that garbage fire of a team, and they have picks, they have money, they have players, and even the Kaiser thing, like it didn't really end up that bad for him, and now I'm looking at. I mean, there's so many things I don't even know how to get. So they got Tyrod Taylor, who's everyone knows I'm a fan of his, but it's on a smaller contract, so they can be competitive if he shows good. But if not, they still have enough capital to draft or do something else. They got Landry, who is the perfect receiver. He's that guy that never doesn't catch anything over 10 yards, but he catches like 10 to 15 of them a game. He's that perfect receiver for a guy who's get the ball out quick or scramble drill kind of guy. Who else are they getting here? Oh, they got Darren Fell, Chris Hubbard. I mean, they got some offensive linemen. Who am I missing here? I'm trying to go down this list. But, I mean, I think they really are starting to build. I still say the biggest problem they have is their coach. But besides that, I think that they're really building a strong team. And a lot of their guys were hurt last year. Oh, they picked up Carlos Hyde. That's
Yeah.
the one I was missing. They picked up Carlos Hyde. And they were able to keep Duke. And they were able to get Josh Gordon back on track, lifestyle wise. That's the one that people don't talk about. I mean, that's
Right.
the one that's the one that can change a franchise. That's a franchise changer. That's humans aren't built to deal with that type of man kind of thing. Like there's no cornerback that's built to deal with that kind of guy. So Shane, what do you think about the Browns so far?
Well, this is what I'm going to say is that the Browns have decided to say, you know what? We are a team that is going to win some games next year. and they are going to do it. Tyrod Taylor, I think, is a good fit for them. I really do. I think he's the key that they needed out there, not only for that city, for the fan base, but even for the energy for that team too. He wasn't that bad in Buffalo. I mean, really, he got benched, and he should have gotten benched out there. I mean, it was a whole, that was just a bad situation for him. He needed out, and I think he's looking to rejuvenate himself. When you look at this draft that's coming up, they've got so many different options that they can go, that, whether they want to get another all-star tailback, or are they looking for another quarterback too, or whatever, and more receivers. They are going to get some good offensive power as well as some more defense because of how many they've got in the draft picks. But they are signing guys left, right, and center, and they've got the money, and they're doing a great job of it. I am going to tell you right now, people that are going to make any bets next year, you better bet on Cleveland in a few of those games, because I guarantee you Cleveland's going to win. And this is, to me, is what it's all about. And I'm glad to see Cleveland be a little bit more aggressive. Now it's going to come down to what you said earlier, Chris. Can these coaches coach properly, get the right offense going, and get points on that board? And that, I think, is what is going to hold them back. If they've got the coaches to do it, you're going to see something happen. Mr. Hirsch.
I just wanted to say that I think one of the best moves that the Browns made was to bring in Evan Wolf. He was the son of Ron Wolf that guided the Packers as the general manager for a long time, and he had been in the Packer organization for a long time, and he wanted to be the new general manager. And they picked the other guy and offered him the assistant general manager position. And apparently because they had snubbed him, he turned it down, and now he's over at Cleveland in the position of assistant general manager. But that guy is super smart. And, I was so angry when the Packers let him go. But I think we forget a lot of times that sometimes the brains up in the office can do as much to help a team as the players that they have on the field. So I just wanted to mention that I think that is a strong point in the Browns' favor, and that's going to serve them well over time.
Well, I wanted to chime in.
I didn't know that.
Well, being the team that plays the Browns twice a year in that division, I'm just saying that, and I know some Steeler feedback that I got from Dina, who's a Steeler fan, Dina Ingalls, that she doesn't like what's going on with the Browns because they're getting stronger. These are some great moves, and what's scary is, you kind of sit and watch the Browns and you go like, oh, this is curious, and it's getting curiouser and curiouser, and you sit there and you go like, oh wow, just like your best drama on TV. Okay, when are we going to get the twist? How are they going to screw it up this time? And I'm telling you, I mean, I'm sitting here going like, oh, Tyrod Taylor, you add Tyrod Taylor. We know about Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor was back up to Joe Flacco. I don't want to play against Tyrod Taylor because Tyrod Taylor can hurt you. I think he's one of the most underrated starting quarterbacks out there. As Shane said, he did a really good job in Buffalo. I almost got him actually got him to the playoffs, despite that debacle of being benched for no reason. And for Carlos Hyde, if it was just Carlos Hyde back there, I wouldn't really fear Carlos Hyde. But when you have Tyrod Taylor and Carlos Hyde in that backfield and that you have to defend against coming out of the backfield running, it's going to be tough for opposing teams. And as far as an upgrade, I think Kaiser threw for 5 interceptions from the 9-yard line, and you have Tyrod Taylor, like one of the tops in the league, running it in from there. So this is going to be a team to be reckoned with. And what's scary is they have so many draft picks, so many things they can do in a draft, as you said, Chris, and they have a lot of money. They got a lot of cash. And so maybe that's where they're going to screw up. Stay tuned, folks. You can't miss this. This is great entertainment with this team.
Shane.
Well, you know what? Like I said, we all agree that Cleveland, I think, right now has made the most noise with transactions, with getting players, with everything, as well as when the draft comes up. So, I mean, there's no question, and you're absolutely correct there, Mr. Hirsch. Upper management is doing a great job of it, and that's what they need to do, and that's what the league is looking for. And I think they're going to be a team to be reckoned with, no question there. But I still think another team that I think is doing really well that's going to make some noise too is also going to be the 49ers. I just want to touch on them real quick. Is out there. They got their franchise quarterback. He set the bar with the price tag that he got for 5 years, 84 mil, whatever it was. So he got the ball rolling for all these QBs. And with the help that they're going to be getting, the young, the attitudes and everything like that they got. The only thing I'm saying is I just didn't like that Sherman pick. But you know what? It came in. They'll figure it out. But I do think offensively they still could use a couple of pieces. But I do think that they are going to have a better team than we were expecting. And I do think they proved that last year just with what they did have, the way Garoppolo played, the belief in that system and everybody in there. I think that's a huge, huge thing. So like I said, I do expect the Niners to pick it up a little bit this year as well and make some noise too. Mr. Hirsch, you got anything to say on that one?
Well, we're running short on time, Shane. I'm going to ask you if you want to give us some information about where we can find you on other places and, plug all your things, and then we'll give it back to Chris Rose for the close.
All right.
But yeah, well, I think the Niners are going to be at the top of the division on the West. Enough said.
Yeah, I hear you guys. I'm gonna love dancing all over this. I'm gonna save all these takes when you guys are just bashing my guys. Go ahead, Shane.
Yeah. All right. You know what, guys? You can reach me at mentaledgeperformance.ca or email me coach@mentaledgeperformance.ca. I'm also on Sunday on Air with the Coach on Fox Sports in Philadelphia. And we'll definitely be plugging our new production here of Knucklehead Productions. So thank you guys for having me on. Mr. Chris Rose, why don't you take us out?
Well, I have a couple of seconds, and I want to know if you're still on, Shane, or if you have to go just real quick. The Ravens just signed Crabtree.
He's trouble.
Should Blaine be happy or sad?
He's a troublemaker.
Be sad.
I'm happy.
I think he's a good player. It might be the knucklehead in me and the ghetto kid in me, but I thought when Aqib Talib ripped his chain off his chest after he was talking smack was one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
I forgot about that.
Life.
That's why I said be sad, because he's gonna get suspended, so he ain't gonna play much.
Dude, have you seen our wide receiver group?
Yeah, Pittsburgh's gonna love you guys.
Hey, thank you so much, Coach Shane. I know you got to go, so we're gonna let you go. And yeah, we got a bunch of stuff coming up. We're gonna be on iTunes all over the place. You're gonna see this in the information down below. But thank you so much for coming on, and appreciate you being part of the family and being so good to us, and being one of the people that maybe is not as knuckleheadish as the guy talking now, but we do appreciate you coming on with us and being you, man, and looking forward to a great year. Thanks, Coach.
Always, guys. Thank you very much.
All right, so we got about 4 minutes and a couple of seconds left. Mr. Hirsch, is there anything you want to say about what's been going on the last couple of weeks, or about what you think about Green Bay going on right now? I mean, this is kind of this weird part. This is that weird part of the year where you don't really know what's going to happen, but you start to see the puzzle come together. Are you optimistic or no?
Well, I'm always optimistic, but please, a couple of shutdown cornerbacks would be a great thing for the Green Bay Packers. What else can I say? And they could use another wide receiver. But I'm optimistic. I'm happy about some of the moves that they've made. Yeah. Thank you.
Shutdown corner. Yeah, no problem, Mr. Hirsch, and thank you so much for coming on. And then Blaine, I know you said you haven't had a chance to really look at what your team's doing, but your team is super active, and we didn't get a chance to get into the whole drama of that one wide receiver that back and forth. But I mean, you guys are being active. The new regime, the Seen
And maybe we
Ozzy
can hit on
regime
that.
is.
I'm sorry. Maybe we can hit on that Tuesday.
Yeah, definitely the Ryan Grant deal we can hit on Tuesday, and I actually we're gonna focus on a little bit of the possible BS of past or failed physicals, as using that as a way to back out of a trade that like buyer's remorse just at the last second. But are you happy with Baltimore so far?
Wait a minute now. Okay. No, I have a different take on that whole trade situation. I think we'll find out down the road whether it was Washington. Their physical was not as what should I say, detailed as the Ravens' physical. So I don't think the Ravens actually did that because they wanted to get Crabtree and have buyer's remorse. And I'll go more into that on Tuesday's show. But one thing I wanted to point out real quick is these contracts, all of these 2, 3 year, 1 year contracts. It's all set up for the new collective bargaining agreement. Because in 3 years, there's going to be a new collective bargaining agreement, and these guys are Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I'm sorry. No, I cut you off. I apologize.
No. I was just going to say they're just setting it up to make more money in the new bargaining, new CBA. So that's why you're seeing that.
And that's a great point. And for those of you who are listening to us for the first time, whether it's on iTunes, Blog Talks, Stitcher, Spreaker, or on YouTube, Mr. Hirsch, for those of you who haven't followed us before, was an attorney. So that is the kind of thing that we can dive into, and that he can give you insight that a lot of other shows won't have. So there's a lot moving on, especially if there are some more problems as far as the contracts are going. When I said that about the physicals, I was only talking about the one side of the team receiving a player, whereas I think it can also be, as Mr. Baltimore Blaine mentioned, sometimes another team not reporting it and giving away, as the Packers are finding out the hard way with Bennett, because I believe they lost their appeal on that deal. I'm not sure what those penalties are. Mr. Hirsch will be on in the coming weeks to tell you about it. Blog Talk Radio /Mancini Sports on Tuesdays. The rest of the time, we will be up here. We'll have a plethora of ways to reach us, but you can always find us on Pigskin Preview on the Facebook machine. Unfortunately, I just realized that's probably part of that name is going to change in a second, so I didn't mean to be vague. But if you've already found us here, you're set to go. So just stay wherever you found us here, and we'll get that detail out to you next week.
Just want to point out, Chris, real quick, that our regular Tuesday show on Blog Talk is not going to happen probably this week, but we're looking at doing something alternate as an alternative to still have a Tuesday show.
All right. Well, you know what? Just like all of NFL teams you're following, what we're doing right now is just getting things ready so we can be at full speed during camp and the off season and the OTAs, and by the end we'll have all that stuff up. But if you found us here somehow, some way, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much.
And what's our email?
Our email is the Knucklehead pods@gmail.com. I said that a little bit. Yeah, I'm gonna cut that out. I gotta figure that out because I just changed it.
Take it easy on the machine, Chris.
I'm trying to scroll up faster than I can. Yeah, so it's Knucklehead Pod, something of that nature, but you will find it. Thanks for calling me out, Mr. Hirsch. You will find it in the description, because that's something I should know. And we just changed it today. So we will have all new stuff, new channel, new YouTube, everything. And we really appreciate all you guys following us. So thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.